It's the gold medal match of the Pro Chess League! St. Louis Archbishops versus Armenia Eagles! Archbishops starring all Super GMs! Fabiano, Dominguez, Wesley So, Shakriyar. Can Armenia compete for the World Championship, or will they be left with nothing but shattered dreams? Find out now!
The St. Louis Archbishops, the definitive Pro Chess League dynasty, with World Championships in 2017 and last year, and a bronze medal in 2018, the Archbishops, led by Fabiano Caruana, have won their third championship in 4 years. But it was controversial, with the Armenia Eagles disqualified for a Chess.com fair play violation. Today, we run it back and give St. Louis its just due. It's time. The championship. The St. Louis Archbishops versus the Armenia Eagles.
Hello and welcome everybody to the St. Louis Archbishop special. I'm your host, Grandmaster Denes Boros. Thanks again for Mike Kummer kind words to people, a bit of an encouragement. You can't really live without it. In any case, if you might have not heard, the Archbishops are crowned champions after the Armenian team has been disqualified. And that leaves the Archbishops on the top, winning the championship, winning back-to-back with this 2020 victory. Talking about the victory, we are going to look at the best moments of the St. Louis Archbishops, featuring Dominguez, Wesley So, Caruana, and many, many others. Lekwang Liam was also part of it, even though did not play in the field for the final matchups, as was Akobian. So this is a special, a St. Louis Archbishops special. So you are going to see some rare footages with interviews with Leinier Dominguez and Akobian, who was also part of the team, although was mostly doing commentary during the semifinals and finals. And these footages are from a charity golf event. So if you see golf carts and golf clubs, don't be surprised. It was for a good reason and a good cause. Anyways, talking about some chess games, let's get into it. And this first game was played between Mamedyarov Dominguez in the quarterfinals. Actually, a very important matchup because Mamedyarov was the India Yogis' hot player going into the match, so extinguishing him and getting at least a half a point was very important. So let's take a look what happened in this game between Mamedyarov and Dominguez. D4, no big surprise here. Mamedyarov has always been more of a close player. He never really played E4. Probably not a big Bobby Fischer fan after all. C4, E6, Knight C3, D5. And this has been actually the height of fashion because of Vladimir Kramnik's efforts. Oftentimes, he would even dare take with his knight instead of the pawn and look for some counterplay in these type of positions. However, Mamedyarov is happy to play a close position with bishop g5, bishop e7, knight f3, h6, and normally you would see bishop h4, castles e3. This has been seen in plenty of matches, candidates matches, the World Championship match between Kasparov and Karpov, and the candidates match between Spillman and Short. But here, as you might have expected from an important match, after h6, Mamedyarov came up with a little wrinkle. He played bishop f4 here. and this actually transposes to the bishop f4 line, with black already committing with h6. Whose does this favor? Most likely nobody, because that h6 pawn move does gain a tempo. That move is useful. You control that square. However, it can be a hook to g4, g5 attacks. So here, Leinier castled, e3, and surprise, surprise, g4 will be a big threat if you're not careful. So if b6, this could run into g4 ideas. If you would dare capture, there's rook g1, and the move f5 that would normally work doesn't really work here because of this idea of bishop h6, and again, that extra pawn move of h7, h6 was not really a good inclusion in this case. So instead of b6, Dominguez went for the critical c5 line. Now c5 is the main move, but without h7, h6. D takes c5 happened, bishop c5, queen c2, knight c6, queen a5. And talking about Armenian ingenuity and creativity, rook a2 is a Nadanyan Ashot idea, which actually is very, very interesting, preparing ideas such as b4. Now note, b4 wouldn't work here because of bishop b4, and at the end of the day, the a1 rook would be hanging. However, Mamedyarov didn't go for that and went for the brutal caveman-like chess and castle long. And it seems that everything is fine for black, but the storm is a-brewing, as g4, g5 is likely to show up very, very soon. However, Dominguez is in a rush to get counterplay. Now, here bishop e7 was played before, and guess what? Wesley faced g4. Actually, Wesley was playing white versus Nakamura, and this attack is actually quite dangerous, and in a long tussle, actually, Wesley won the game. So Dominguez played knight e4 instead, saying, hey, I do want to put pressure on your king before you could cause any drama around my side of the board. C takes d5, knight takes c3, queen takes, bc takes, king c2, e takes d5, rook d5. And for the initiated, you'd think, well, white is up a pawn, what is there really to worry about? Now the thing is, this king on c2 does not feel that comfortable, and this rook is very much likely to be in danger in the future. So bishop e6, Dominguez immediately pounces, and you can again see that this h6 extra move is very beneficial. There are no knight g5 ideas, which can be very annoying when playing with black. Rook b5, b6, knight d4. All very logical. Knight takes d4, and interestingly enough, here Mamedyarov makes a decisive mistake. He decides to take with the c-pawn, when in fact e takes d4 would provide a very nice little shelter for his king, and probably would be slightly better. But for some inexplicable reasons, Mamedyarov wanted to go for something very sharp and decided to take with this pawn. And now watch how Dominguez dismantles this way of playing. Rook c8, king d2, rook c1. No longer does that move in the corner can ever move. And talking about that king, ain't feeling too shabby, especially as my rook is about to join the party via rook fc8 and rook c2. d5, trying to close it off, but Leinier is insistent. He's going to play bishop f5 and say, hey, I'm joining your king on the second rank. Rook b3, rook c2 check, rook a2. Over defending the bishop and preparing the very elegant checkmate of rook c8, rook c1. Note, you can't really go bishop d3 because at the end of the day, you would lose your rook in the corner. Rook c3, bishop b4. And that's one of the things that super grandmasters do. If they have passed pawns on the side, they're going to utilize them. Rook c4, a5. Let's push him. Let's push them all. Bishop e5. Well, if you give us a pawn, I'll take it. Rook d5, bishop d4, b5. Rook c7, bishop d6, check. Now, the main idea of bishop d6 is to undermine this rook and bring it to a much worse square. He could have checked on a3 first, but decided it's better not to have a rook on the 7th. King d1, bishop b2. Once you're up a pawn, every exchange is to your benefit. Take 6, rook d8, king e2, a4. And now you can see the situation has changed dramatically. White used to have lots of pawns in the center. Now there aren't any pawns. That rook is still sad in the corner. Not to talk about this bishop on f1. And this pawn is speeding away to transform into a lady. King f3 followed. And another one. Again, that rook is stuck in the corner. g4, bishop d3, bishop g2. And at last, that rook is about to escape, but it's too late. And here, Mamedyarov resigned as after bishop h1, a3, and this pawn is queening. And that actually shows how clutch this team was whenever there was an important moment. So this win actually made sure that the archbishops are going to qualify versus the yogis. Talking about Dominguez, we did have an interview with him at the golf cart. Watch.
My last two tournaments before the semifinals and then the finals were not especially good, so I was just trying to basically not to ruin things. Like, I knew our team is very strong. I mean, especially Wesley was playing extremely well during the whole season, and Fabi as well, so I knew that our team was basically the favorite, so I was just trying to play well. I did well against the Chinese team, and then in the finals I didn't do so well, but I think, yeah, in general it was it was not bad. But again I lost the first game, which it's always tough after that, because you lose some confidence, and then it's kind of more difficult to play. But overall I was just sad because I felt that we deserved to win. I mean, we were playing so well during the whole season, and I felt that we were the strongest team and we deserved to win. I mean, then we found out that there were some fair play violations, and of course it's always sad to hear and sad that it happens, but yeah, as we all know, online chess has that kind of problem that you have to take measures in order to try to avoid that as much as possible, but yeah, it can always happen. Well, I felt relieved because first of all, I felt that the loss in the final round, I was to a large extent guilty for it, because I did half out of 4, which was not good. But yeah, after I saw the news, I was kind of relieved and happy for the team, because as I said before, I felt that we played really well during the whole season, and we really deserved to win the tournament. So yeah, I was happy and relieved. I don't know them really well. I mean, I know the players, of course, but I wasn't really following their trajectory over the whole pro league. But Yeah, I mean, as I said before, this is a problem with online chess, that there's this possibility there, and it's just sad when there is a proof that the fair play policies have been violated, and it's just bad for chess in general. So I did feel a bit sad about that. Feel that we have to do whatever is necessary to try to minimize that. And somehow I feel that it's really hard to be 100% or close to 100% sure, but definitely you would need like something more, I think, than what we had at the Pro Chess League finals, like in terms of cameras, like maybe more than one, just like minimum, I think 2 or 3, and of course ideally you would like to have some kind of person there to make sure, but I know it can be difficult to arrange, but yeah, at least I think 2 or 3 cameras would be better, and just essentially all that we can do to try to minimize the risk and try to make sure that players are not really worried about these kind of things would be nice. Other than that, I think the system was good and it was spectacular enough, and if they can keep it like that for next year, that's fine. Yeah, I think definitely he had a point. I mean, he's a very strong player and a very experienced player also in terms of online chess. So I think he's quite sensible in what he was saying. And yeah, after I also did some analysis of the games, and I kind of had similar feelings. Congratulate everyone on our victory, and I just hope that we can continue to win more titles.
Interesting takes by Leinier Dominguez right there. And as you might know, Leinier Dominguez not only contributed between the matches against the India Yogis, but also in the crucial Chinese Pandas match. As you may know, the Chinese Pandas did take 3rd place after they defeated the Chess Bros. So, without any further ado, let's take a look at Dominguez's game versus Li Chao, which was very important between the Archbishops and the Chinese Pandas. E4, C5, Knight F3, A6. A typical move, the O'Kelly trying to avoid any kind of preparation. And that kind of shows how much they respect Leinier's opening knowledge, trying to avoid the main lines, the mainline Neudorfs, and try to get more and much closer to the middle game instead. Now, Dominguez, unsurprisingly, chose the aggressive C4 move, trying to get into a Marozzi type of structure. Just a side note, you can also go C3 and D4, trying to build a C3 Sicilian-like position where A6 is not the best move. C4, Knight C6, D4, takes, E5. And one of the nature of Super Grandmasters, if they see a subpar variation or they face one, they will always look for the strongest response. They will not shy away from punishing their opponents. Now, White could go Knight C2, Knight F3, Knight B3, all very reasonable moves. However, they're not ambitious. Dominguez immediately goes Knight F5, stating that in this case, unlike in the Kalashnikov, Black would have D5 move. But in this position, there's actually 2 pawns blocking that, so if D5 is played, white is not forced to capture with the e-pawn. In fact, d5 was played by Li Chao. C takes d5, takes, knight d4. Now, someone with less experience might panic here and say, oh, Li Chao might have prepared an idea in this position. However, after carefully observing, you can notice that even though white is behind in development, Leinier does have the bishop pair. So if he manages to survive the opening phase, he will have a very promising position. So he continues on resolutely with knight c3, knight f6, and bishop g5. And bishop g5 is a very crucial move in this position because you got to stop black's initiative before it's too late. Bishop g5, pinning, and also stopping any threats of knight takes d5. Bishop e7, takes, sort of slowing down black's play. Bishop takes f6, bishop d3, g6, castles. And castling is actually a very, very smart choice by Dominguez, as he notes that in the long run, he has to be better. Has an important pawn on d5. The pieces are well coordinated, while this king on e8 is a little bit suspicious. G takes f5, knight e2. Immediately aiming for an opposite colored middle game. One thing that you need to learn, and I'm pretty sure that Dominguez already knows, the side who's attacking in an opposite color middle game is the one going and calling the shots. And it's clearly white, as black has just too many pawn islands and a weakened king. Knight takes c2, queen takes c2, queen d7. Seemingly everything's fine. Black is in control, but here Leinier spots an idea and plays queen f3, seemingly blundering e4. However, e4 runs into bishop takes c4, and it turns out at the end of the day, you are going to lose that bishop, and with this weakened king on e8, you just have a terrible position as black. So Li Chao was forced to play f4. Rook c1, no long castling allowed. Bishop g7, rook d1. Simple, but strong. Just getting all his rooks on the open files. Queen d6, queen g4. But look at how strong these moves are. They're all full of purpose. The c1 rook controls the c8 square, so there's no long castling. The rook on d1 supports this passer on d5, and queen g4 is setting up for mating attacks in the future. Bishop f6, and this is again an important turning point of the game. I'm very certain that Leinier spotted this tactical trick of bishop takes h7. And it works because rook h7 would lose either the h7 rook or the a8 one. However, it is a team competition, so you do not want to risk if you do not need to. And here, as a great team player as Dominguez is, said, I do not need to get into those. Maybe the h-file would actually be useful for you as black, so I am just going to double up on the c-file. Rook d8, bishop e4, consolidating. King f8, rook c1, and once this rook enters, it'll be clear that the advantage that Dominguez has is near decisive. Rook g8, queen h3, rook c7, queen b4. You can see that Li Chao is desperately trying to unsettle Leinier, but it's impossible. Queen f5, rook g6, and probably the second most impressive move by Leinier, he plays g3, making sure there are no back rank issues and creating a bit of a luft for this king on g1. And now the game is practically decided. Queen b6, king g2, no more tactical trickies. king g7, queen e6. Simple but strong, quite like the whole game, attacking the queen on b6 and threatening the f7 pawn with decisive threats. The game continued with queen takes e6, d takes, bishop g5, check, king g8, and sometimes clarity is the one thing that matters. So even though rook c7 might just win the game, there's nothing as clear as just taking the rook. Bishop takes c1, bishop h7, king h8, and e7, which actually won the game, as rook f8 is unstoppable and Dominguez is going to promote. So that brings us to the second interview with Akobian, as there are plenty of players who hadn't played in the finals, namely Alejandro Ramirez, Lekwang Liam, and Akobian, and there are a couple of others as well, but they also had strong opinions about the matches. Let's listen in.
Oh, Archbishops did fantastic in my opinion, and as Leinier mentioned earlier, Wesley So was just like phenomenal throughout the whole season. Fabi played really well, Jeffrey played really well, Lekwang Liang played really well, Leinier, everybody was playing well. I did commentary for our, I think, quarterfinals and all those matches, and we were super excited to qualify to the finals and go to Norway actually, to win the title in Norway in person in front of a live crowd. And we were making plans and everything, how we're gonna go there, do the stream and do some commentary live from there. But unfortunately all that, as you know, didn't happen because of the COVID, you know. And then eventually it was postponed for many months, the finals, and it happened online. Yeah, I just really wish it was the other way around. We could have played the final in live. Everybody pretty much thought we are the team. We are the team to beat. I mean, Chess Bros really strengthened their team this year. They brought in Anish Giri, they brought in Grishchuk. They had a strong lineup as well. Of course, China Pandas are very dangerous as well. But still, I don't think they could keep up with our top players. Well, to be honest with you, I didn't know anything about it until I got the email Friday. I think that was when announcement was made, right? Thursday, yeah. So the day announcement was made, and I got an email from Mike Hammer. I opened the email that he said this is what happened, that we are the champions because Armenia Eagles are disqualified. So I clicked on the link and I read the details of the press release from chess.com, and for a moment I was like pretty shocked. I didn't know what to think, you know, because I played for St. Louis team for many years, but I also know the players from the Armenian team, so it was mixed feelings. I mean, the situation in Armenia, as you guys know, most of people who are watching the news, there's been a war in Armenia since September 27th. So when the finals were played, that was the second day of the war with Azerbaijan. It's still going on right now. Every day, people dying on both sides. It's like a very serious war. It's not just a little bit of shooting here and there. No, it's just like battleground. If you see the videos, you'll be like really shocked to see what's happening. So it's like a real war. And that was the second day. So definitely Armenian players. There were two Armenian players who were playing the match, Petrosyan and Martirosyan. The other two players is from Iran and from India. There are two players for the final match. So yeah, definitely they were probably under some stress because I probably have family members in a war. So definitely it was very difficult day for the Armenian team. I was very surprised because very surprised to find out, and yeah, pretty shocking when I read everything. And we have trained together, we've played many tournaments together, so I've known him since childhood. I'm a little bit older than him, so we played very strong player, very talented player. I mean, very accomplished player too. Twice Olympic champion, winner of most of the big tournaments in US. I think it was 2018 he came here and won National Open, World Open. So he's a fantastically strong player. So that's why it's very hard for me to take sides, So just gonna wait to see what gonna follow up, because we know Tigran says, he denied everything, so he's gonna try to prove. So we'll just have to wait to see what will happen, I think it's not good for the image because it's at a very high level from that point of view. But I think from another point of view, maybe it will, help to get some more features, some other methods to use at such a final event, where it's so much at stakes. Add some more measures to make sure it's, fair play, so everybody know that this is the very fair play. There's no questions for anybody. I want to just congratulate our team, St. Louis Archbishops, for winning the championship 2 years in a row.
And 3 out of 4 years.
3 out of 4 years. So big congratulations to the team manager, Mike Comer, to the players, to Tony Rich, to all the people who make this possible. So I'm very proud to be part of the team. So very happy and looking forward to be part of the team next year.
Interesting takes by Akobian. And as Var mentioned, there were people who played amazingly throughout this event. Jeffrey Zhang, as mentioned, he had a very up and down game versus Wei Yi, and the MVP, that is Wesley So. Now, Wesley So has been one of the strongest and most well-performing player of this whole season. So let's take a look at his accomplishment versus Wei Yi. So in this game, Wei Yi is playing white versus Wesley So. Wesley actually plays the aggressive e5 move. e5, bishop b2, knight c6, e3. And as you might have noticed, the whole Chinese team was trying to dodge all the opening preparation that the St. Louis Archbishop team had. And it is very interesting to see how much they respected their opening knowledge. Knight f6, bishop b5, and I'm mostly astounded by Wesley's choice of not playing the by now very usual bishop d6 move. Now, at first glance, this seems to ruin and decline all the basic principles of chess. The bishop is stuck in there, but on the other hand, it defends the e5 pawn, and after a6, this bishop will have to move with a long theoretical discussion. However, instead, Wesley played queen e7, which is a new idea and a breath of a new fresh air in this position. Finally, something exciting and not the same old with bishop d6. Excuse me. Knight c3, a6. So actually, queen e7 has exactly the same idea, but keeping the d pawn push at reserve, trying to get that c8 bishop out. And that's actually Wesley's forte. He loves playing classical chess, meaning chess where you do not break the chess principles. Bishop c4, g6. And if you look at this position, you can quite much tell that this bishop ain't doing a whole lot on b2. It's actually kind of struggling there and does not have enough pressure on e5. And if that fails, Black's position is just sound. Therefore, Wei Yi embarks on the sharpest possible move and plays h4. He is trying to create some tactical havoc before Wesley could consolidate. Now, as you might expect, Wesley doesn't want to have any part of that game, so he refrains from bishop g7. Now, bishop g7 would involve an exchange sacrifice after h5, knight h5, knight d5. Now things would start working for Wei Yi with threats on c7 and on the queen on e7. and boom, on h5, queen takes h5, and at least white has some play against the weakened king on e8. However, Wesley, as we talked about it already, is a very solid player, probably the most reliable team player we've seen so far, and goes h5, just eschewing any kind of complications, saying, I don't believe you have anything else on the king side, so I might as well just stop it right now. Knight f3, bishop g7, knight g5. On the other hand, he did give Wei Yi a nice little outpost on g5. Castle, castle, d6, and finally, that sad bishop on c8 is freed. f4, and now bishop g4 is played. Oftentimes, we'd underestimate how these simple ideas work. Now, as we look at this position, it might have seemed a little bit strange, but queen e7 was a very, very good start of a logical idea, trying to remove all black's pieces onto the king side, therefore fianchettoing, castling, and then go play d6, bishop g4. And so far we can see white isn't doing that shabby, because that bishop on b2 is sort of walled up, that knight isn't where it's supposed to be, and if anyone has an advantage it must be black, as black has the central control. Queen e1. So Wei Yi actually does the only thing that you can do if you have lost the central control. Play on the flanks and try to undermine your opponent's king. Now, f4 is actually also threatening ideas such as f takes e5, activating the rook and putting some pressure on f7. And there is actually a very rare but not well-known idea. If you can build this famous number 4 in the King's Gambit, usually your attack is working and it is very strong. Now, that would be true if the f-file was open. But it's Wesley to move, and he says, goes ahead and plays e4. So that does not work. Queen g3, still sort of preparing breaks with f5. But Wesley knows if your opponent is trying to strike on the flank, you've got to stop them in the center. So he goes knight b4. A bit threatening on c2, but that's not the main idea. Wesley tries to play d5 and chase away this bishop. Once this bishop is gone, black will just have a reversed French, which is a treat. Who wouldn't want to play against the French? a3? Is a3 a problem? Not a problem, says So. d5, if you take, I'll take on c4, and black has the bishop pair, and with lots of pressure on d2, black is doing quite well. So here, Wei Yi opted for bishop e2. Are we going backwards? No, says Wesley. We're playing d4, we're trying to close off our opponent's play. Even if he takes d5, there will be threats on c2. So instead, Wei Yi opts for bishop g4, dc, bishop c3, knight d5. Now the situation has cleared, but it didn't get any better for Wei Yi. Even if you go bishop e2 now, you are likely to face some uncomfortable threats along this long diagonal, and if you don't have exact counterplay, something decisive to get the initiative, you are more than likely to be worse here with white. So Wei Yi decides it's time to gamble it all, but it's difficult to gamble versus Wesley because Wesley is a very staunch defender. Bishop f6, bishop takes h5, and going the way of the Yasser school, Wesley takes everything. Rook a1, queen f6, rook f1, give me that bishop. Now, knight e4 is just a ghost threat. Yes, it's a check and it attacks the queen, but there's queen g6 and you're just down a whole rook. So Wei Yi goes f5, queen d6, rook f4, and Wesley again says, I don't believe in no ghosts. Knight e4, king h8, and here Wei Yi realized that it's time to resign, and he did. Because if he would have taken on d6, there's knight e2 check, and that'll be too many rooks versus not even a knight. Because after king f2, takes, c takes d6, and Wei Yi would have to face 2 rooks versus no rooks. Not a good deal versus a grandmaster. So this was one of those fabulous games by Wesley against a very, very strong and good tactician, as his Chinese opponent is. Now, MVL isn't here, and I don't know why I'm mentioning MVL. I really wanted to say Fabiano Caruana, even though Wesley's been on the roll and been doing splendidly this whole season. On the first board, we had Fabiano Caruana, so we really need to take a look at one of his games. Incidentally, he again faced off with Wei Yi. But I do want to show you this game. Even though there were ups and downs, Fabiano showed that even if you have a bad position or a somewhat of a difficult position, you can always look for counter chances. So let's take a look at that game, shall we? This is Caruana Wei Yi. Yep. All right, so e4, e6, the French, the terrible, terrible French defense, d4, d5, e5. Now there is nothing wrong with the French defense, but there is, and that's mostly the bishop on c8. So that's the reason why everybody and their grandmother plays the Caro-Kann, because that's the way to go. You want a healthy bishop. c5, c3. So Caruana chose this e5 system just to keep this bishop smothered on c8. Queen b6, knight f3, knight c6. The only downfall, as you will see in the system, is that white will have to defend all of these 3 pawns to consolidate. a3, bishop d7, b4. Fabi is trying to get a bit more space on this side of the board. Rook c8, bishop e2, knight e7, bishop b2. Over defending the critical square, the d4 pawn. Knight f5, castle, bishop e7, queen d3, knight a5. Nice little trick. b8 doesn't work because of queen takes b2, but Caruana does not care. He goes knight d2, just making sure there are no knight c4 ideas. Knight c4, takes, queen c3, castles. Now, you might tell me that this is decent for black, and you're correct, because compared to a usual French, this bishop actually has some breathing room. Now, French improves if you get some breathing room for your bishop. If you don't, then you're more than big of a trouble. We can tell that in this position, Wei Yi is doing fine, if not slightly better already. Knight d2, queen d8, bishop f3, bishop c6, takes. Now, you could never really take on c4, because there's this idea of b5, and you would be crying, because you lose the piece. So b5 is played. So once your opponent gets a c4 pawn, it makes sense to cut off the ammunition with b5, so there is no a6, b5 life support for the c4 pawn. Rook c7, a4, queen d5, rook d1, rook d8, and to be honest with you, probably this is the happier kind of French without the c8 bishop. Knight f3, h5, bishop c1, trying to activate the bishop. And that's one of those things that super grandmasters do, and especially Fabi. He makes sure he can get better piece placement. So he realized that this bishop on b2 wasn't doing too much, so he's going to reroute that bishop via c1 to e3, a6, rook b1, queen e3, bishop e3, a takes b5. And again, this is a critical moment, probably the first important moment of the game. Caruana has been a little bit worse, but here he takes his chances. If white would take with the pawn, white would have no counterplay. Probably would have to just look around and see what to do and just react to black's play. However, he takes on b5 with the rook, saying, hey, you've got a weakness yourself, and this is the moment the game will start turning as Caruana will start pressurizing the b7 pawn. Rook a8, a5, rook d8. Sadly for Wei Yi, he's at a loss at the moment what to do. h3. Again, not doing much, but slightly improving the position. a5 fixed this pawn on b7, h3 created a bit of a loft for the king. So with every move, Fabi is improving his position, while Wei Yi is visibly sort of floating and not finding the right plans. Knight takes e3, f takes e3, h4, rook b1. Now these pawns on e3 and e5 might look ugly, it's a doubled pawn. However, this e pawn is supporting the d4 pawn, which kind of solidifies Fabiano's position. Rook d7, and that's again a sign that black no longer has an advantage. Knight d2, queen g6, knight f3. Now, people often frown at others repeating moves, but sometimes it's a nice statement saying, hey, I don't think you're better, I don't know what you want, but I can repeat if I'd like to. So Wei Yi, I think, with the next move, goes overboard and tries to win a position where probably equality should be preferred, something like queen e4, accepting repetition. But Wei Yi is an ambitious player, there's no fault in that. However, queen g3 seems to be going in the wrong direction. Rook c1, just eyeing the c pawn, bishop g5, queen d2, bishop a6, rook b4, g5. Now g5 is asking for it. Now don't show this necessarily to your coach. They'll not like g5 either. It's a move you never want to see. Maybe it'll return in your nightmares, but it also doesn't really make sense, to be completely honest with you. Yes, black is trying to play g4, but it definitely locks up this bishop on h6, and I don't think it is positionally correct. But it also turns out that knight h2 by Caruana is just super strong, not only threatening knight g4, but also pinpointing that there are some problems on f6 and h6. Probably Wei Yi was counting on winning the pawn on e5, but it really doesn't matter, because after these pawn trades, white will have infinitely better pieces. f5, rook c8 check, queen c2, not falling for cheapos such as knight e5, queen e5, and then losing a piece. So queen c2, pinning the f5 pawn, king h1, queen g6, knight e5, rook c7, and suddenly the b7 pawn is the weakness and not the d pawn, and that means that white is in full control in this position. bishop g7, queen c5, and sadly for Wei Yi, he has to part with the b pawn, or has to trade on c7. He decided to take, and g4 was a very nice move, trying to muddy waters, even though he must be worse here. Now here Caruana chooses to take on g4. However, I would have preferred taking on b7 because knights actually enjoy closed positions, so it kind of makes sense to keep it closed as much as possible. However, h takes g4 is still a-okay. fg, knight g4. There's still not many threats over there. The queen is protecting all of those squares. Queen f5, back to e5. h3, queen takes b7. And again, this is typical high-class chess. You are not scared of anything. You calculate it, you just give a check, then I go king h2. If you take on g2, well, be it, I'll capture it back, and there's nothing going on. h takes g2, queen g2, bishop e5, de, check, king h2, queen b4, a6. And sadly, you can't even check and play for perpetual because this king is awfully placed. If it was on a7, you could hope for a perpetual, but in this case, with these kings opposite each other, this has no hope. Queen a4, check, a7, queen c2, queen g2, and resignation was due because you couldn't even lurk around the king because there's queen h3 check, and if you move anywhere else, there's an a8 queen emerging, and that's game over. And that is the last game that I wanted to show you guys. And just as you've seen, a8, new queen, and the St. Louis Archbishops are the champions of 2020. Thank you for watching.